I have a question in the.
Let me recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Barthold, just to rewind the tape and slow it down a little bit. You mentioned small businesses currently facing a mandate, but I want to make sure I heard you correctly. Do small businesses currently face a federal mandate with respect to creating a retirement plan currently?
Mr. Arrington, under present law, the decision to create a retirement plan is entirely elective to the employer,
Okay.
regardless of size.
Okay, all right, so does this bill create a new retirement plan mandate for small businesses? I think I heard the word must, which is the same as shall, which sounds like a federal mandate. So does this bill create a retirement plan mandate on small businesses?
This may seem like a fine distinction. It does not what it requires is that the employer maintain a plan or facilitate an automatic enrollment system. Now, this can be achieved, for example, by establishing an automatic deposit into the employee's IRA. So it does not have to be a formal plan.
Let me just make sure I'm clear. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me make sure I understand, because I don't want to play semantics. I just want a clear answer. And I know you're trying to give me one, but does this bill mandate that small businesses established by nature of having an automatic enrollment mandate that that they have some retirement plan or this IRA that you mentioned?
If the employer has to, as I noted, establish a plan or facilitate the automatic enrollment, such as I described through an IRA. If not, the employer would be subject to a penalty tax of basically $10 for each day in a non-compliance period for each qualified employee.
Okay. So if the federal government's telling the small business that they have to have this plan, a retirement plan or IRA, where there's an automatic enrollment, and if they don't facilitate that, as to use your words, then the federal government's going to fine them. And that amount is $5,000, you said?
No, $10 per day per employee.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
For a period,
Okay, and then
for a period of not more than 3 months.
Okay. So is the definition of a small business like many others, 50 employees or less, or is it 100 or less, or 500? What's the definition where you would exempt a small business on account of being too small?
If an employer
In this bill context.
in this legislation, if an employer has no more than 5 employees receiving at least $5,000 in compensation as measured in the prior year, that employer is exempt.
5 employees
Yes, sir.
receiving at least $5,000. Okay. Did the Affordable Care Act include a small employer exemption from the employer mandate to provide health coverage? And
Yes,
what
it
was
did.
the threshold for
Yes,
the
it
number
did.
of employees under that ACA?
Yes, it did, Mr. Arrington. It was generally measured at 50 full-time equivalent employees.
Okay. The revenue cost of this subtitle B, I heard you tell Mr. Schweiker, is $47 billion. What was the revenue score associated with the bipartisan Securing a Strong Retirement Act?
Just a moment. That we reported that estimate to the Congress in Joint Committee document JCX 2221. It had revenue losing provisions and revenue raising provisions. The net effect was a positive revenue raised of $158 million over the 10-year period. That's the net of approximately $27 billion in revenue-losing provisions offset by approximately $27 billion in revenue-raising provisions.
Last question. Thanks everybody for your patience. It seems like the majority has left some important bipartisan retirement provisions on the cutting room floor, as we say. Does Subtitle B facilitate an employer match for student loan payments? A. B. Does Subtitle B cover hardship withdrawals for victims of domestic abuse? And C. Does Subtitle B include additional catch-up contributions for late career workers?
Mr. Arrington, I believe you're referring to some of the provisions that were in that earlier legislation reported by the
Yes.
committee. And those three provisions are not duplicated or subsumed in the present legislation.
Thank you,
Last-
gentlemen.
Last one, I promise.
Thank the
Mr.
gentleman.
Chairman, can I just get this one last one in?
If it's more favorable than what you've been suggesting, yes.
Does Subtitle B offer a tax credit for employers that make military spouses eligible for planned benefits? And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging.
Thanks.
Mr. Barton.
Mr. Arrington,